right, here's attempt 2. Hopefully we don't have any more technological issues. And then when Sam gets on here, I will let her in. And today is the sexy, I still put first Friday because that's typically what we call it. But today is actually sexy second Friday of the month. And it looks like Sam has joined. And so hopefully we don't have any issues with her coming in. I just saw her request. Let me see if I can. Hey. Go live. All right, there we go. Or it seems to be letting you in. Hopefully we don't have any issues with her getting in here as well. It looks like, hi Lyndsey. Welcome. We're hoping Sam can get in just fine. We just had, we're having some technological issues. Hence why we always start 5 minutes early in case there is something going on. It looks like it's still waiting for you to get in, Sam. I don't know if you can see or not at all on your end. If not, we can try maybe having Sam start it, and then I can try to join her. But it just seems to be kind of... I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh, no. Okay, well, we're having a day, apparently.
Oh, there you are. Now I can see you. I know I've been having issues too. It doesn't mean like a different location. My other ring light died, so I had to find like a good place. I'm actually sitting on the floor today. We're just gonna make it all kinds of fun and different. Well, welcome. Today is sexy second Friday of the month, and we are super excited today to have you all joining us. Today we're going to be talking about transforming relationships. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but Sam and I have a live workshop coming up in 2 weeks? 2.5 weeks? I don't know. It's really soon.
Just over 2 weeks. 2 weeks from Monday.
2 weeks from Monday in South Minneapolis, where we're going to be doing a workshop in person on sexuality and the Enneagram. And so we want to talk a little bit and give you a little bit of a teaser around that. But let's start by giving introductions again and talking a little bit about who we are. Many of you already know who we are, but every once in a while we have new people hop on. And so we always just reintroduce ourselves so everybody gets an idea of who we are. So I'll start and I'll have Sam go next. My name is Lyndsey Fraser. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist who has a private practice in South Minneapolis, where I specialize in relationships and sexuality. And I have had my practice, I think in September, I go into 14 years, which seems really wild to me that I've been practicing therapy that long. So that's a little bit about me. Sam, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm afraid to move too much. I don't want to scramble the technology gods. I'm Sam E Greenberg. I am a sexuality researcher and Enneagram coach specializing in sexuality, intimacy, and relationships. Oh, Lyndsey says see you in a week and a half. Yay, Lyndsey! Different Lyndsey. And I'll also see this Lyndsey. I'll see all the Lyndseys. We're super excited to be in Minneapolis, and if you're going to the International Enneagram Association conference, Lyndsey and I will also be presenting there with the two of us and with our colleague Misty Rainwater in Enneagram After Dark. So hit us up for all those things. But we have the Monday after that, the conference ends, when hopefully people are still in town. We're doing our all-day workshop on transforming relationships. So Enneagram and Sexuality for Transformed Relationships. And that's why we're here doing this topic today, because we're going to give you a teaser, a taster, if you will, of what we're going to cover during that training. We actually only have one spot left open. We had a really amazing, enormous response of people signing up, but we do have that one spot left for anyone who's watching and hasn't signed up yet. Lyndsey, anything you want to add before we dive into our mini agenda?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of covered the introductions, a little bit about the workshop. Let's just go into a little bit of like what our teaser will be. Do you want to give the audience a little bit of what that will look like for today?
Sure. So our full day training, as well as today, we're going to follow the same outline, but it's just going to be mini today. So we're going to start with, just a really quick general Enneagram overview, because we do have some folks coming to our training who are a little bit newer to the Enneagram. That'll be a really short part of it, and it'll be a really short part of it today. And then we're going to go into how the Enneagram type and sexuality interact and how type impacts sex and sexuality, and then into how instinct impacts sex and sexuality. And then we'll offer case examples. In this case today, just one case example, but in our all-day workshop, we'll be doing many case examples and working with them. And then we'll answer questions. And I also want to say that the training and also today are both for professionals as well as personal. So we have a bunch of therapists coming, but we also have people who are just going for their own personal interest, and we have like a personal transformation track and a therapy track. So it's for everybody, as is our discussion right now.
Yeah, I think that piece is so huge. So one of the things as a therapist myself, I think if we're not working on ourselves, we can't really be at benefit to our clients. So really when we developed this workshop, it really is about working on yourself with the potential to get some CEUs and some education as well. Because I think to be good at what you do, whether you're working your personal life or a therapist, you need to work on yourself as well.
So let's dive in, starting with the Enneagram generally. Lyndsey's going to do an overview, and then I'll do an Enneagram general fun fact.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is most of us oftentimes sort of think of the Enneagram as like a personality inventory test that happens or occurs. And though, yes, it is partially that, the way that I typically like to voice what it is I'll say there are 9 different ways that all of us approach the world. And if you take in subtypes, there's actually 27 different ways that all of us approach the world. What's beautiful about the Enneagram is when you understand these differences, it gives you insight into one, what are your pain points? 2, what are the things that you need to work on to have more healthy self and moving forward and kind of what we call the gifts. And then also like where you might get stuck or where you might struggle. And I think in therapy in particular, what is really important about this is that you can't give, or even just yourself, what I give as far as things you need to work on be very different. So for instance, if you had an 8 who is the challenger, and a 9, like I'm not going to tell an 8 to be more assertive. Actually, an 8 needs to work on being less assertive and giving space and time for other people. But on the other end of that, a 9 might actually need to be doing the opposite and stepping forward and having more assertion. And so it gives you insight into kind of who you are, what are your pain points. When we look at relationships, what I think is essential is also like when you're hitting your partner's pain point or the things that they might struggle with and being able to do. It was really interesting today. I was working with a 3 who's partnered with a 9, and he can get frustrated with her sometimes and having that inability to kind of like make movement or be assertive or move forward, right? And like even just how we do things, the pace of things, right? 3s like to move quickly. 9s, I'm a 9, we're very, very slow movers. And so it can be just that insight into sort of who you are, what is your tendencies in life, what have you done to sort of function and survive within the world, the things that you thought that you needed to have, and just how that impacts relationships, yourself, and others. Is there anything that you would add, just kind of general? I know we could talk a whole episode on this, but anything that you would add to that, Sam?
Just something that jumped out for me as a coach and for therapists as well is if you don't have a framework like this, you might have your 8 coming to therapy saying like, I don't feel heard. I need to be more assertive. If there's someone who doesn't have a lot of self-awareness. And I think a therapist or a coach could make a mistake of helping an 8 then work on assertiveness. But with the Enneagram, we have this shortcut roadmap to help us avoid, making mistakes like that. And I think what you were saying just brought that up for me. I was going to share also an Enneagram fun fact, general Enneagram fun fact, because I'm a researcher. This is from my research on the Enneagram and sexuality, but it's the general section of it. The history and origins of the Enneagram are actually hotly debated. Despite the modern popularity of the Enneagram, like very little is known actually about the system's more ancient origins, if there in fact are any. So it's been a source of speculation and debate, even among Enneagram scholars, with many suggesting it has ancient roots and many others being unsure. But basically, there's little evidence, limited evidence to support any claim of a connection between like the modern Enneagram as we use it now and antiquity, but we are not sure. So we think one day we'll make a not sexual episode about the history and origins of the Enneagram, but that's just a fun fact on the Enneagram in general. Are we ready to move into sex and type? So well, just for the purposes of our short mini agenda today, we're just going to do some did you know, one for each type, about how that type impacts sexuality. So did you know that type 1s report, compared to other types, they can go comfortably longer without having sex than any other type can? I'm just gonna, obviously we have gone into detail on all of these and we will in future episodes, but this is just one for each. Did you know type 2s feel sexual desire when they feel emotionally cared for by their partner? Did you know type 3s feel sexual desire when they feel impressed or in proximity to impressive people? So either impressed by their partner or just in proximity to people they find impressive. Type 4s report high overall sexual desire and high participation in BDSM, poly, and kink communities. Did you know type 5s are the least responsive to sexual desire cues from others, meaning that type 5s are the most self-contained with their sexuality kind of arising within their own system. Type 6s experience sexual desire when they feel safe and secure in their relationship. Type 7s, did you know, value their own pleasure more than any other type. So that's not to say they don't value their partner's pleasure also, but they are very into their own pleasure more than any other type. Type 8s report the highest sexual desire of any type. And type 9s actually report the second highest sexually explicit materials use of any type. So I did that pretty fast, but those are our fun facts about type and sex for our mini type and sex agenda item. Anything you want to add about type and sex, Lyndsey, before we move to instinct?
I was just going to say, so we're just giving you kind of the tidbits and a little fun fact. We actually will be going into sort of, if you come to the workshop itself, we'll be going into each type a little bit and sort of the things that they need from partners as well as the things that they need for self-growth. We could do a whole day training on each type. Anyway, and so we were trying to give you because sometimes I know you want to know your own type or know a tidbit about yourself. And so we really wanted to make sure that we gave you a little tidbit so you can hear about yourself and your partner, but just knowing that we're going to go a lot more in depth in that actual workshop as well.
And that's with both research and with Lyndsey, her therapy experience. We have, the gifts and challenges of each type that they bring to the bedroom, things that partners tend to say and that partners tend to hear from each type, as well as those growth tips. So yeah, we're going to be quite in depth, but obviously this is a tiny mini version of our agenda. So with that, let's move into sex and instinct.
Yes, so if we go into sex and instinct, the did you know facts are that self-preservations are more sexually assertive than socials and less assertive than sexuals. Socials are the least sexually assertive instinct, and sexual instincts report the lowest tolerance for sexual dry spells. And so this gives us a lot of information, just sort of how instincts show up and all of that as well. And again, we have done full episodes on each instinct, and there's a lot of information here. But one of the things that I talked about and why this instinct piece is so huge too is we oftentimes think people approach sexuality the way that we do. And so what Sam and I just showed you is all these multiple different ways that people approach sexuality, and that the little little fact I like to share a lot too is most of the sexuality work out there is written by your sexual instinct dominants. Are we surprised? I'm not, because of course they are the ones that are going less between dry spells. They're the ones that are going more into that depth and that connection, and sex serves a different purpose for them than it does for self-preservers and socials. But what can happen in that process is socials or self-preservation dominants feel a little bit lost, not sure if they're normal, and you will find a few books written by other dominant instincts, but they're kind of harder to find and they're not there as much. So I just think it's great information to know a little bit more about how all of us approach sex as well.
So if you're coming to the IEA conference, our Lyndsey and my presentation there will be on the role of instinct specifically, because we only have an hour and a half. We can't talk about everything, but we're really excited about how the connection between sort of history through now, of the role that instincts playing in the meaning making of sex for everybody, and how there's sort of these three gigantically different lenses on sexuality plus the 9 lenses of the type. So that's what we'll be talking about at IEA, and we'll also be talking about that at our workshop. So let's move into the case study, unless there's anything else you want to share about instinct, Lyndsey.
Nope, nothing else there. And with the case study stuff, so one actual workshop, it's much more in depth. We actually have little stories around different couples and how you can interact or relate, have personal growth or therapeutic growth for clients in your office. But one of the things that we thought is we would just bring up one of the common pairings and one of the things that you may see in this particular relationship. And the relationship we picked was your Enneagram 9 and your Enneagram 1. This is a really common pairing that comes into my office quite frequently, and they have really different needs and really different tactics and sort of how they approach each other in relationship. Typically, the initial attraction is you kind of have the piece that I'm missing, right? The one comes in and brings sort of that structure, that organization. They're able to sort of tell us what we need to do and what's the right thing. And, 9 struggle with that. They have a little bit more difficulty making decisions and choices and difficulty being assertive. And they see that in the 1, and that's very attractive to them. And at the same time, the 9 brings more of that calmness and that peace and kind of can settle the 1 a little bit more in relationship. It also becomes kind of their main pain point when they come into therapy. The 1 wants the 9 to show up a little bit more, the 1 wants the 9 to show up a little bit more, and then the 9, and the 1 just kind of wanting more of that peace, and like the 9 wants more space and not to be told what to do. But this is just a tidbit about the relationship of peace. Again, we could go into a whole session or whole episodes just on one pairing. But what you see sexually often happening is that the 1 might have some ideas about what is the right way to approach sex. And they will be kind of bringing that in, and they might have some direction or criticism or any of these kinds of things. And because 9s can struggle with being assertive, what you sometimes might see is that they might withdraw. They might not be as interested in sexuality. They are kind of passively resisting sort of connection with the partner because of that. And oftentimes the 9s don't know what they like or want. And so when the 1 is asking, like, what do you want? What do you want the experience to be like? 9s oftentimes don't have an answer to that. And that can be very frustrating for the ones that they're in relationship with. And so this is just a little bit about the common dynamics that we see with couples coming into our office. And oftentimes kind of what you want to do with that is help each other see sort of that pattern that's happening and occurring. Also kind of helping them determine like what the good enough sex is in the relationship, giving that, 9 some space to decide what they like and they need and they want, and the 1 kind of giving them that space, the 9 being more assertive and kind of communicating what they need and want, or asking for space if they need it. And so that's just a little bit of the tidbits that I would add. I feel like I could go all day what to do with this particular couple. But what would you add, Sam, as far as what some dynamics you see in 9s and 1s? And we're not going into instinct here. We're just going into kind of the type dynamics.
Yeah, I think with a 9 and 1, you can get the 1 being a little almost parental towards the 9. You can get that with a 1 with any of the less assertive types, also 6s. Um, where the one is sort of like, you just need to do this, just do this, just this is the way you do it. And we can see that actually in sex itself, that the one is like, oh, well, if you just did this, everything would be great, or just do these three things, and that's what you're supposed to do to have good sex. And then nine is like, like, stop telling me what to do, stop parenting me. Like, I have my own internal experience, but I can't get in touch with it because my one is being so kind of intense about coming towards me with telling me what to do and things like that. So that just mirrors what you were already sharing, Lyndsey. And then I think you can get ones being actually both ones and nines can be sensitive in their bodies, but sometimes ones more so, which is maybe what you would not predict. Nines often do have a pretty fluid relationship with sexuality, and ones can be have so much rigidity from being tense, being physically tense, that ones can actually be more sensitive physically than nines, which is often surprising to the couple and surprising to people in general. So I like what you shared, the tips. I like the one I learned from you, Lyndsey, about doing a hand massage. And that could go either way, between a nine doing it for a one or one doing it for a nine, where you can really explore the dynamics of what kind of touch is preferred, taking it out of a sexual context so it's not so loaded.
I think one interesting fact about ones too is it's not uncommon for women that are ones to have sexual pain. It comes in a lot to my office. And I'm just saying that so that if you are a one or you are experiencing that, because of the rigidity in the body, it's not unusual for you to hold that rigidity in the pelvic floor as well and to have some pain. And sometimes, one's, depending on what their right or wrong is, they might not say that. They might not seek help for that. They might be embarrassed about that. And I just want to say that it is perfectly normal, and I have definitely seen a pattern. Of course, there's no research for me to prove this, but the pattern in my office is not uncommon for the clients coming into my office that are reporting sexual pain to be ones, and there's sixes too that report some sexual pain. Those two in particular, which makes sense if we think about a little bit about the mechanisms of their type. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. That if you are experiencing that, like, it's normal, you can seek help. Their sex therapist or a physical therapist to help you guide that too.
So in our workshop, we'll be doing a bunch of these, and we'll go very much into the instinct dynamics. Obviously, it would be quite different with a sexual nine and a self-pres one, versus a sexual one and a self-pres nine would be really, really different, but the type dynamics would be there either way. We'll go into a bunch of examples, case examples, examples that folks can look at therapeutically from a therapeutic lens and from like a personal lens. And that's a big part of our all-day training also. And then we were gonna just answer some questions because we'll answer questions that day. So our mini agenda here, we'll answer a question or two. If you're here live, please send us in questions, and that can be like anything relationship, sexuality, Enneagram, or the intersection of any of those things is kind of what we are happy to talk about. But I did get a question that I thought was really lovely, and I want to answer it here. So the question was, how do you build more mental capacity and bandwidth for relationships? And I know this is asked from one of our withdrawing types, so I want to answer it more from that end, although you could have an assertive person ask this too, but in this case it was more of a withdrawing type asking it. And we can talk about it. So I think just to start off, this is like such a big question, and it's such a nice question. What It can be really difficult for our fives, our nines, our self-preservation dominance of even of any type to build the capacity for relationality, especially when we have our blind instinct sometimes being the sexual or the social. That can really make it hard to build that muscle around relationality. But what I would say is that doing it is what builds your capacity. So a lot of times we have, especially our fives, saying like, how do I become ready for a relationship? How do I like be at home on the metaphorical treadmill, like training, so that I then have enough capacity to have a relationship. And that's just not how it works. It's having the relationship, and by the way, feeling extremely overwhelmed by it in the beginning is how you build the capacity. Speaking for myself as a five, not just with intimate relationships, not just with sexuality, but with every single thing in life, I basically have to do it, feel terrible, and then my capacity increases. So don't sit and wait to be ready. You're ready now. Go and be in relationship, every kind of relationship, and then face what comes up for you as you do that, and your capacity will grow. Lyndsey, this could definitely be its own all-day workshop, but what would you add?
And it was interesting because, you took it, the way you were taking that question was like maybe somebody seeking a relationship, right? And having capacity. And I took it as like, what do you do when you're already in a relationship? So I'm going to answer from that perspective because interestingly enough, I am in relationship with the withdrawal type. There's two of us. I'm a 9, he's a 5. So I'm a social 9, he's a self-preservation 5. So I have double kind of, withdrawing there. And interestingly enough, like it does take, like even in our relationship in particular, I'll use our example, it takes intentionality. Like we're really good at doing our own thing. And I think that's very true when you have two withdrawal types in relationship with each other. The 4s might be a little bit more wanting the connection because of the sensuality and the soul connection that they want. So they might seek it a little bit more, but they can also, I have seen many 4s do a similar thing in partnerships when they're not getting their needs met, kind of withdrawing and not being available. And so it really is like intentionality around connection and continuing to work on your bond. We will do like nightly walks together, right? Even we don't feel like it. We just want to like lay on the couch or do our own thing because we notice when we do that, and the nice thing about walking is like you're just movement. So it's just good for your body. You don't even have to say anything and you're connecting with your partner, which is creating that mental and that physical capacity to have the relationship and the connection. We watch shows together and then we talk intellectually about them and things like that. And so just having a ritual around things that you do together to keep the bonding and the connection there. Because I know for my spouse and I, like, it'll be like we could be really good at doing our own things, but there's like kind of this slow disconnection that you're not even necessarily aware of actually happening. Now that's because there's two withdrawal types in relationship, right? If I was with an assertive type or a different type, they might be initiating that connection, but when neither one of you does, you have to be really intentional. So it's just interesting because I was taking it of like, how do you keep the relationship going versus like, how do you even get into relationship? But it is, I mean, I think even as a withdrawal type myself, sometimes there was this because of a 9, like it's easier when I was single, it was easier to like, like I'd start dating, but like if I couldn't set good boundaries for myself or things didn't feel good, I would just retreat and leave versus being assertive and doing the integrity filled thing, which is saying, asking for what I need or want or telling the person the relationship isn't working for me. And it's like, I think even for 9s, there's that growth point of like people deserve when you're in partnership or trying to have partnership that you're honest with them and you're transparent with them. You don't just like ghost them or disappear. And I'll be honest, there are times in my life where I did just kind of like passively disappear, and I feel bad for any of those partners that I was in relationship with at those times. I've learned better now, and hopefully people can learn from my lesson as well.
I'm so glad you answered it with that other meaning in mind because I actually don't know which of those two meanings the person was asking, what context they were asking, and so now they have both answers. And if it was seeking relationship, they have my version, and then they can use your version once they're in a relationship. So that was perfect. And actually, I want to add one kind of cute thing that your examples made me think of because you talked about going for a walk. Going for a walk or a drive when there's not this pressure on the connection, when there's like sort of parallel, like you're not forced to make eye contact constantly. It's not like let's sit down and have a date now and stare at each other. That's really lovely and really helpful for our withdrawing types, especially our 5s and 9s. I find that 5s and 9s in friendships, even like 5 and a 5 friendship or 9 and a 9 friendship or a 5-9, they love that. They love to do walks or drives because it's just like so it takes a lot of pressure off. So I love that example. I thought that was super cute. If anyone who's here live wants to ask anything, we have about 1 minute left to answer it. But I want to say again, there's only one spot left in our live in person workshop in Minneapolis. So if you're either in the Minneapolis area or you're coming to town for the IEA conference, we're just that day right after, the Monday right after it ends. Go ahead and sign up and be our last person to make us full. And the link's in my bio. It's at our website. It's super easy to find. We post it all the time. And we hope to see everybody there and see you in person. Anything to add, Lyndsey?
I was just going to say too, like, we do have other things coming in the works that'll probably be more virtual. So that even if you're not in Minnesota, probably later fall, early in the new year. If there are things that you really hope and want from us too, like we are always open to ideas and feel free to message or ask that as well. Looks like we maybe got one question. It says, I'm curious what you all may think about the dynamics between a sexual 4 and a social 8, particularly regarding their sexual dynamics. There's a lot of intensity, but going in very different directions. Curious if you might have any advice. This is coming from a sexual 4. Thanks. You want to start with that, Sam?
What a great question. Yeah, again, I'm sorry that we don't have tons of time because that we could really go into it. A 4-8 pairing generally, taking the instincts out of it for a second, 4-8 is one of the most intense pairings there is. We do see it. It's because like both of those want to live, a kind of a constant stream of intensity, just that 4s are in the emotional intensity and 8s are in the physical. So it actually can work pretty well and be very, very passionate. And then the sexual social differences depending on what that 8's secondary instinct is. If their instinct is social and then sexual, it might be a little bit easier. If they're maybe sexual repressed instinct, then the 4 is going to feel like you're not meeting me in this like really feely, intense, juicy passion thing that I want to feel in our lovemaking. You're instead just like coming at it physically intensely, and then I'm feeling missed or unseen in that. We could talk for so long about this, but Lyndsey, you have anything quick to add?
I mean, the only thing that I was thinking too is you sort of have 2 rejection types. So there's kind of an anticipation or expectation of potential rejection that can kind of influence or affect the pairing as well. And just to kind of be aware of that piece and that component of it. Otherwise, I think you answered it perfectly, or how I would answer it.
I would say just direct message us if you want to kind of chat a little bit more, because I feel like we didn't have time to give that like an in-depth answer, but that's such a good question. So we're happy to talk more with you about it. So that went by super fast as always. Send us questions or ideas or anything that you want to chat with us about. And otherwise, we'll see you in Minnesota or we'll see you next month for Sexy First Friday.
Great to see you again, Sam, and thank you everybody that was here live with us. It's great to have a live audience, and we always love getting questions live too. Take care. See you next
Bye,
month.
Lyndsey.
Bye.